Good morning, everyone. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us here at Probably at the Library. Today we have Rose Servitova as our guest. I'm so excited. I've been dying to talk to Rose forever. We have a bit of a time zone difference between the two of us. I'm here in the States in Eastern. Rose is in Ireland, so we worked out time zones between the two of us. Mm-hmm. For this month's Probably at the Library Book Club, we read, I got it right here, Rose's Completing of the Watsons. Rose has also written the Longbourn letters, which we'll be talking about the two of them, if that's all right with you, Rose.
Absolutely, yeah. Good afternoon from Ireland.
Yeah.
And good evening to anyone who's watching us, and hello in general to anyone who's catching up on this afterwards on YouTube. So, yes. Brilliant.
Thank you so much for joining us. So if you don't mind, we'll just jump right in.
Let's do that.
And I did not send Rose any questions ahead of time, so this is all just rapid fire at her, and we'll see where the conversation leads us.
So I love those. Seat of the pants ones. Yeah.
I did see a video that you did of a talk, and I kind of wanted to circle back to that because I thought it was so fascinating. You were talking a little bit about reading as a child and your influence that you had and to start reading. So if you could just start us back off at the beginning of Little Rose and how reading influenced your life.
No hassle. Well, Melissa, what you're referring to there is my grandmother. And I think, the more talks I've done on that, and when I say something, the audience sometimes come up to me after and say, oh my goodness, my grandmother had this bookshelf. And, so it's interesting how many times it's a neighbor or a grandparent or someone else. It's not necessary. Sometimes it's, you get reading from home and sometimes you don't. I didn't grow up. I grew up in County Limerick, which is kind of the southwest of Ireland, and we didn't have books in my house growing up. It just wasn't, a thing. And so basically in the summers, some of my siblings and I used to spend every summer in Sligo, which is up in the northwest of the country, with my granny and my granddad, who had a little kind of cottage there, I suppose, on the foothill of the Ox Mountains, which felt so Heidi-like, I really felt... Oh, it was just wonderful. And we had great freedom there. And I was the second oldest of 7 children. And I had to do a lot of work at home. When you're not going to school, I was helping to bring up the kids and, had a lot more responsibility, I think, on my young shoulders than I felt I wanted anyway. But at my granny's, it was different. You were like eating pies and brownies, and you were being kind of, not spoilt with regards time, and spoilt with freedom, and spoilt with the outdoors and running around with my cousins. And it just was a fantastic, idyllic childhood. So anyway, what happened was my granny had bookshelves, and my granny really believed in books and education and reading and that, and had all the classics. So that's really where it started. It would have started with Enid Blyton and then went on to, let's say, Heidi and Black Beauty and that, and then went on to Anne of Green Gables and all those books, Little Women, Jo's Boys, all of those, and on to obviously the Brontes, Jane Austen, etc. So that's where Austen was. I was introduced to Austen, and it's a very key time. If you check out lots of Janeites, they often, in those hormonal years from 13 to 18, have come across Jane Austen. So unfortunately, Mr. Darcy becomes like what they expect, all meant to be like, and that sort of thing. So it was funny because then I would go to church. My grandparents were very religious, and I'd go to church with them on a, Saturday or Sunday, and they're like, look around the church and see, I wonder, is there, some Mr. Bingley in here somewhere, or something. But anyway, it was just a beautiful, idyllic time in my life, right up to my late teens, right up until I went to university and that. And prior to, about the year before my nan passed away, she asked my sister, my cousin and I to go into what we call the good room, where the couple of bookshelves that I'm referring to, like it was nothing vast. This was not the library at Netherfield Hall. This was literally 2 shelves probably, or maybe 3, with a few books on them. And there were old books that she was buying before she got married, some of them. And some of them, when she was in America, she was a nanny. And they got divided because of the war, her engagement to my granddad. So she was a nanny, an au pair in the United States, and that was 1939, the war broke out, so she wasn't able to come back till 1945. So one of her books the book I picked out that day when she asked me to pick out a book was Wuthering Heights, and it's, got her maiden name written down in her handwriting, and it says 1939, and she bought that in the US. So loads of special memories to do with the classics, and it was a lifelong love affair, but life takes you in lots of different directions, and I ended up following a career. My career, though, what basically I always wanted to be around was libraries, and I worked in university libraries and normal libraries, and then I worked in bookshops at writers' museums, and where else was I working? In one of the biggest retailers here, a bookshop as well, and just various things like that. So I was always surrounding myself by books, but never having the courage to write, so that was interesting. That only came about when I was almost 40, when you're up in the scrap heap and you kind of think you have a small mini midlife crisis, and you kind of go, oh, if I don't do it now, I'll never do it. So that's kind of where it all comes from. But I do find a lot of Janeites do. I'm sure it's no different with yourself, Melissa. Were you introduced to books at home, or did you have someone influential in your life?
It was funny because I grew up, my mom always had a ton of books at home, and hearing you mention Black Beauty, Little Women, my mother had her set from her mother, and they are all inscribed Christmas gifts that my great-grandmother gave to my grandmother, and then my mom had them at home. So Trixie Belden, Nancy Drew, all of those books, my mom really encouraged us to read a lot as kids.
That's beautiful.
Laying outside in a hammock, reading in the summertime.
Yeah.
The library was huge for us when we were kids because we couldn't afford a ton of books. And we read so often. There's no way my mom and dad wouldn't be able to buy them all. So it was really encouraged to, escape to new worlds and just enjoy the adventure. And I love that there's that tie because my grandmothers are from the 30s. When she was receiving them, and your grandmother, the same time period, they were. Wow,
it's a special time. And when you look at the photos, I have they're in very little photos when they're from the 30s or 40s or whatever. But when they are in a photo, they're like Hollywood stars or something. And I've seen this with other friends of mine on Facebook recently, putting up maybe a photo of a grandmother, and they're absolutely amazing. When you just think of how for granted we take selfies and everything like that now, they're just stunning. They're just beautiful, elegant. I don't know, it's just something class about that. And the love of reading and the passing on of things to generations is lovely. And it's probably why, and I know you probably would have noticed on social media, Melissa, that I buy, if I can, either first editions or early editions of some of the books that I bought, and sometimes, and all the better if there's an inscription. I got one recently, and I think it was the first edition of the Blue Castle, Ellen Montgomery, which is one of the best books I've read in years. And the inscription, it was published in 1926, and the inscription is a lady's name and 1926 and Christmas actually. So again, like that, I did try to track that person down of trying to go through censuses and that, because to know who that person was makes it extra special. I haven't successfully found out yet, but I just think it is something special. Here is this person received a brand new book, maybe from their favorite author, Christmas, the year it was published. And, it wasn't easy to get books. They didn't have Amazon back then, and, cost a few bob. So it's lovely. Yeah, love books.
It is. I love just thinking back to, visualizing in your head that moment of excitement when they're getting a new book and opening it. And,
absolutely.
We just had a conversation about that over on Instagram. I posted used or new, and most everyone that commented that they appreciate used books said they almost prefer it have an inscription because it gives that sense of history to the book.
Yeah. Once or twice, a few times I've actually I bought books that had, and these are very incredible as well. It's an award. It's a blah blah blah. It's an inside, and it's got like this little
book plate.
Note, kind of book plate, stuck on it, and it's such and such a school, Edinburgh. 1895, and the book is Charles Lamb, and inside is like for arithmetic or something like that, this little boy or whatever it is, and I just think, wow, so special. This was treasured. This was a prize. They received it. Everyone gave them a round of applause, and I just think, so many stories in books, and it's always lovely to find something. Another time I found a letter, an unusual letter inside a book. I can't remember now what I did with it, because sometimes if I find, and it's in Ireland or something like that, or sometimes if I put it out there, I find you know, the person several generations later, and I actually pass it on to the family then if I can track them down, like, or the school or whatever, you know. But yeah, I found a letter. I must try and remember which book that was in now. But sometimes, yeah, that has happened where a letter's included as well. It just adds to the mystery and the intrigue and all those things that we love so much.
My best find in a book was I found a little boy's note to the tooth fairy that his mom must have tucked inside the book, and he had lost his tooth and didn't have it to put under his pillow, but he was hoping that the tooth fairy would still come.
Oh, wow.
His money.
Yeah. I actually used to press things in books as well. And what kills me is that I think some of those books have gone, but there was one very unusual thing is I have a 5-leafed clover. I know 4-leafed clovers are really hard to find, but I found a 5-leafed one. They're one in so many million, like, but I found one. And then I went missing for years and I hadn't a clue where it was and all that. So anyway, eventually.
Be jealous. He's always looking for a 4-leaf clover.
Yeah. But I pressed it in a book and then I didn't find it for years and years and years later. And then I discovered it. So now I have it safe and sound. And I've learned not to kind of keep things in books because I'm a bit careless that way. I'll borrow them or lend them, to someone or what have you, you know?
Yeah. So let's talk about where your sense of humor came from, because you definitely infuse a lot of humor into the Longbourn letters, and even the walk scenes we see humor taken in that book. But the Longbourn letters, for me, I think my cats thought I had lost my mind because I was just literally laughing out loud as I'm reading these correspondence between Mr. Bennett and Mr. Collins.
Yeah. So, well, I mean, the very obvious one is actually my father, probably. My mother, too. There are two of them. They're cackling and roaring, laughing half the time. There's always anecdotes. And when we grew up, I'm actually going to tell the story. I'm going to change my hearing aid battery, if you don't mind. It's just noticed. For God's sake, what a time it picked. But anyway, as I was saying, my father, my father most obviously, because there's an anecdote for everything. So, like, he's fantastic, and my mother, and we like, there were 10 of us in a house. Like, my uncle with special needs lives with us as well, and you know, we had a very, very rough, tough childhood. You know, it was the 80s in Ireland. It was a bleak enough old spot. So basically, that's perfect now. I can hear you perfect now again. But it was, Ireland in the 80s was tough, full stop, and we were working class family. It was very tough, and I recall that, and I know that my parents just had a sense of humor through everything, you know, and my father in particular, even to this day, like, something happens and he'll kind of break the tension and he'll say, to hell with it anyway, or just, you know, if you lost your job, he'd say, F off out, you know, just don't, you know, whatever, you know, tell them to go to hell or whatever, you know. He just has a great sense of humor, a great way of looking at catastrophes in a funny way that just makes you laugh and let go of things, because life is very ridiculous. And I suppose from that perspective, I love looking at people the way maybe Austin did. I'm not saying, I think I look at them similarly. I don't think it was necessarily I borrowed this trait from Austin or anything, but people and psychology. I went to university to do psychology and ended up doing something else because psychology required way too much work and commitment and getting up early in the morning. So I went off with an English and history degree instead. But I was, to do psychology, always intrigued with the way people operate and the way they work and everything like that. So what was I going to say? So this sense of humor and finding characters, and my father would be like that. He can really imitate people, and just when you find characters, it's just great. So that all my siblings and that would have, some of them very much so, great sense of humor. And we always spend our time together laughing a lot. So that would be one thing, I suppose. And then I think it's a survival mechanism a little bit, I think we all have. And maybe Irish writers a little bit, I won't say more so, but there is something about kind of coming out of something that was negative and coming out with kind of like laughing it off or something like that, you know. But also reading wise, I mean, we have an Irish author who passed away, but it was John B. Keane. And then there was the English author P.G. Woodhouse, and loads of Irish women writers are very, very witty, very funny. So Marion Keyes and, you know, several others. So Yeah, so that's it. That's with humor. I just can't imagine me writing anything without humor. I got to a point when something was supposed to happen in the Longbourn letters, and I just had to change it because I knew I couldn't come back up from there if we went to that level of despair and loss or whatever. That I wouldn't be able to kind of come back up from it. So it went to a low, but I had to come back up again. And humor is great, to add weight to things. So while you can be galloping along with the Longbourn letters, underneath it all, there is, there are themes, there are, humanity, there's other stuff going on. And I think staying down there with the deep stuff or staying up here with the light stuff doesn't suit me. I kind of prefer, because life is like that. You can be at a funeral and just the most hilarious thing can happen, and that's it. Life without humor, I'm just so glad we have it. Can you imagine if we didn't? Yeah.
Shakespeare really showed us that you can take us to almost deeper depths of sadness if you bring that humor back to it, and you bring us out of that and give us that breath to take. Because like you said, as humans, we can go through these horrible times, but if we can get ourselves back out, even in the moment, it might not resolve the situation, but if we can laugh a little.
Absolutely. Yeah. Oh God, I hate when I get serious. And I do, like anyone else, I get petrified and worried about things and nervous about things, and I make up all sorts of things that could go wrong in my head. And I wake up at 3 a.m. and all that sort of thing. But it's always great when you snap yourself out of that, and with humor and stuff like that. I just hate being stuck, I suppose, in a heaviness. So it's about kind of being able to kind of laugh at yourself, I think, and laugh at life. It's just such a ridiculous show at the moment that as Shakespeare said, all the words a stage, and it's just really is. And we have to have a good old laugh because it's such madness sometimes, that we have to kind of get the laughs when we can get them. And it helps us with the rest.
That's what I'm trying to teach my son, that one of the most important things in life is to be able to laugh at yourself, because you hold the control if you find the humor in the situations. If you take yourself too seriously, then it's just going to come back and bite you in the butt. If you can laugh along with yourself.
Absolutely.
So, tell us a little bit, if you could give us a quick story, because I know you shared one in the video I watched, just you said you have a never-ending stories of crazy things that have happened to you.
Oh, my ridiculous. Okay. Well, I will tell you one. I don't know if I shared this in the video or you were watching. I might have. Did I mention the one about my sister? Did you remember that? Okay. Well, I'll tell you now and you'll know whether it did or not. So my sister, there was one part of Limerick that she kept, in the suburbs, that she kept moving. She'd stayed there for a year or two, and she had a great housemate called Nesson. And he was great crack, actually. He was a great laugh. But Nesson was spending more and more time in his hometown and less time, but he was great in that he still paid the rent. So she'd have the whole house to herself, and he wasn't around as much, and that suited her because she loved her own space and that. But she moved quite a bit over the years, but always in the same suburb. So I went out to help her move, and I was moving boxes and that. And that evening I was to come back, and we were going for a Chinese. That was it, to celebrate, to take her out, maybe have a glass of wine. We were going to one local. So that was fine. I went home, did my few bits, got dressed. Now I spend 5 minutes getting dressed and getting done up. My sister spends an awful lot longer. She cares more about how she looks, and she's right. But, she'd have a lot more clothes and that. And she's a beautiful girl anyway. She's a beautiful person. So anyway, rocked on that night, and it was dark. Now, she was driving a green Toyota Starlet at the time, and I was insured in it. And we used to go off on little road trips around Ireland and that, and it was great fun. And I loved driving it because it was quite manual, it's already manual. Like most cars are in Ireland. We don't use the automatics, but so most cars are manual. But hers, being that little bit older at the time, was even more manual. It had the old smells and all this sort of thing. It would take off, it was it had a personality of its own, but it was great. But, there weren't too many of them around, let's say. So that was fine. And pulled up that evening, drove down to the new estate, pulled around, saw the green car, and I pulled up behind it, blocking it in and what have you. Kind of tapped it on the side as I walked past it, to the front door because, it was kind of like, as I say, I don't know, I think we had a name, Betty or something like that for her. And I said, oh, how's it going, Betty? Off I went to the house. Now, my sister is very careful. She always locks her door. And to be honest with you, I wouldn't, let's say where I live now, I wouldn't like turn the key in the door every single time. But she always had that habit. And I suppose she lived in more built up areas than I did. But anyway, I knocked, no answer. So I just checked the door as I always do. It was open and I was a bit surprised. But anyway, I could hear noise coming from somewhere. So I went in and I did what I always do. I let out a shout, like, the mating call of some monkey and I went, oh! I arrived. So I was at the bottom of the stairs shouting up because she was always going to be late. She was getting herself dollied up, makeup, good clothes, jumping out of the shower, fake tan, the whole lot. So she was doing that. So I was, let her know. And she didn't say anything back. So that was fine. I said, I did what I always did. I went in, and at the time she had the channels and I didn't. So I think I didn't even have a TV at the time. So it was such a novelty. She had all the channels. And if you remember The Swan, it was a US program where women got lots of plastic surgery done. Like, I was totally fascinated with this. So these were women who felt down in the dumps, a bit like time, feeling like worse for wear. And they ended up with loads of plastic surgery and picked and knocked and teeth straightened and everything happened. And I was lying across the couch anyway, flicking through the Sky channels and found The Swan, and I was watching it away, and I was waiting for my sister to come downstairs, and I was kind of in reclining position and flicking away and watching The Swan, and lo and behold, a bearded gentleman, came out of the double doors from the kitchen with a plate of his dinner in his hand. And he said, hello. And I said, hello. Like, this must be one of Nelson's friends, And how's it going? And he said, are you meant to be here? Like, or what? And I said, yeah. And I kept watching TV. And then anyway, between the jigs and the reels, anyway, he said, I think you're in the wrong house. And I said, no, I think you're in the wrong house. I was like holding my own anyway. Lo and behold, anyway, went out, he escorted me to the door. And I looked out and I saw my sister about 3 houses up with another green car. And he was like, I said, look, you should lock those doors. There's a lot of crazy people out there. And he started laughing and I was laughing. So I went up to my sister. I was crying laughing for the whole evening. Like, this poor man, he got the fright of me, like Cleopatra on the couch, like flicking through the channels, I'd say. Thought a total lunatic.
I love that you were holding firm and he was the crazy one for being in the house with the plate.
Always assume yourself the sane one unless proved otherwise. That's my law. So like there was loads of those kind of situations that when I go in on the Monday and told my colleagues, they were like, oh my God, you have such a catalogue. Like, what now? This sort of thing. And I won't go into the others because I know what you're referring to, but like, yeah, they're for another day. But and that's the laughing at yourself type thing, doing something really ridiculous and being okay with laughing about yourself and that kind of thing.
You feel that helps with your writing to be able to have those experiences?
I write about them all, like when they happened to me. There was one, I won't go into it again. This is one I definitely didn't mention. When I returned and I bought this cottage at the time, and I was single at the time, and I had returned from traveling overseas for a long period of time. I was getting used to single life. I'd broken up with a relationship for 7 years. And next thing I was, embracing local activities. And I joined a group called the Ballyhour Bears I intended to be a lifelong relationship with the Ballyhour Bears that lasted one fateful day. And I went and, they meet at a certain point and going hill climbing and whatever. So there was A, B and C walks. So I said the C walks are the leisurely strolls. Now that is me to a T. I am never going beyond the C walk again for the rest of my life. But the B walk was what we were meant to be going on. And because I said, look, I'll be out here now, whatever. So a lot of the group were elderly. I was the youngest person there by 20 years. They were much older people, retired, everything like that. So I was like, oh, for God's sake, this B walk will be, I'll be able. It might be tough. I might have sore legs the following day. But next thing, anyway, they all looked around anyway. And they kind of said, you know what? Because like I'd never met them before, whatever. They said, since Mary and John and Kitty and all these ones are here today, sure, why don't we upgrade it to an A walk? And they're all delighted, whatever. So I had to climb a mountain, one of the highest ones in Ireland. I'd never done anything beyond a stroll. in my life. And at one time I like just kind of collapsed on the top, somewhere near the top. And I was like saying, will I ask them to get the helicopter to kind of airlift me down? I cannot move. I just don't know how I'm ever going to see. Like, they were like mountain goats. They were just flying along. And I was trying to be positive, and I was trying not to let them see. I thought like it'd be like Saving Private Ryan. I'll have to carry them. These old people. And it was totally the opposite. And I had so much respect for them. I was like going, oh my God, I'm just so not able. So I remember not being able to move for about 3 days after it. I was like a cow in rigor mortis, below on the sofa, hoping someone would come and feed me. And they sent me a letter of apology. They obviously saw, as I struggled my way back to the car, here's a, this girl isn't able at all. And they sent me a letter of apology, just saying, oh, we think that walk might have been a bit tough for you. So anyway, I never went back, but they were lovely people. And, someday maybe I'll retire.
They're probably still telling the tale of this poor woman that tried to take a walk.
Meanwhile, exactly. But actually, funnily enough, and the point of this was that I actually wrote about that, and it won one of the leading Irish literary awards, which would be the Listowel Writers' Week humour essay. Now, it was second or third. It didn't win the overall prize, but do you know, it is true. I do use it, I suppose, and sprinkle them in. And I would have done that with the Longbourn letters. Quite a lot of the things in the Longbourn letters, you'd be surprised, happened to people I know or happened to myself or something like that. And I just, made it happen in there instead, so made the most of it. Never let a good story go untold.
Right. Do you find being a writer makes you a big people watcher? Do you observe and nitpick little personalities?
I think it's your nature anyway. I think I was like that if I never even became a writer. I was always like that. I think it depends on the type of writer you are too. I'm a character writer. And I know a lot of other authors who are very much like that. And you'll see other writers are more about the writing, the language, the plot, the story, the landscape, the descriptions. I won't be describing sunsets in mine. That's kind of the way I am. It's not about the sunset. And as much as I wish it was, I really do think that I was, destined to, I did try and do short story writing classes and various other things. And I just found there was a certain quality that I just was lost on me, because it was always, my background a little bit is in theatre, and I have interest in the whole screen adaptation thing as well, because it's dialogue heavy. That's where I tend to go. Now, in fairness to Austin, she does too. She's very dialogue heavy, and she doesn't describe what people are wearing or how they enter a room, how the sun, the landscape. It's very bare. It's all about the people and the interactions, and I think that's where I go. And I think writers do observe people and are curious about people. And I'm amazed sometimes when I read something to try and convince me that person, that author, isn't a psychopath themselves, because how could they know the mind of this individual so well? How can they describe certain things so well unless there's a touch of it in there themselves, or that they've done great research in that? So I do think they're hugely observant, I suppose is the word. I wouldn't necessarily take notes unless something was, I do tend to, if I'm in the middle of writing something and something comes to me, or I come across a character and I want to capture it somehow in my story, I will do that. But otherwise, it's just, I love people, I suppose, and I love personalities and all that. Yeah.
I imagine you're I definitely got this from my father. He is the sort of person that, we go to the grocery store and he has to have 10 conversations with people on the way through the store. And I was laughing. I told my mom, I'm finding myself more and more like my father, the older that I'm getting. And especially we've moved so many times that a lot of times, you don't have friends and family around. So I will pick up a conversation with anyone at this store that I can, start chatting away with. But I just find there's something so fascinating about talking with people, and you don't know what stories you're going to hear from them or their history.
Especially elderly people. I always had this even as a teenager. I had such huge respect for elderly people and people living alone who had stories and things like that. And I don't know, my father, in fairness, I know my mother too, but there was a lot of, I don't know, my father used to give people lifts. We'd be driving somewhere, there'd be an elderly man on the side of the road who didn't drive. A lot of them had bicycles, you know, and that's how they got around Ireland in the 50s. And here they were now totally left behind because they had to go to a village or a town for their pension or what have you. So my father would often give them lifts from pubs or from wherever. And, you know, listening to the stories, and I was working away. It was probably the first time. Was I working away the first time? I'd say it was. The first time I was working since I was 15, probably, in and around where we live. But when I was 17, I went to a different part of the country in a tourist region and stuff like that. But there was an elderly gentleman there, and all the people who worked in this particular restaurant and pub and whatever you, all had the accommodation there, and so had he, because the people were so lovely that I worked for, that like he had nobody else. He had nobody in the world, no family. He was a very elderly gentleman, and they looked after him, minded him, fed him, everything like that. But his name was Arthur, and he had just such stories. And in the end, he ended up going to a nursing home, and I used to visit him there and bring him his packet of Sweet Afton cigarettes and stuff like that. But he used to tell me some bits of his story about he married a millionaire heiress in London. He was over there in the construction, and things fell apart. And everyone has so many stories in them. Yes. So yeah, absolutely.
It's fascinating.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you never know where someone's been to where they are now. And like you said about the older gentleman, like there's just a treasure trove of things to hear from anyone.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
Oh, well, there is commentary going on the side about
I never know
cup of tea.
Okay. We must talk about the tea before we go much further.
Yes.
Okay. But first of all, I will introduce everyone. This is one of my more recent purchases, Gustav Klimt. Now, this looks deceivingly like a normal cup, right? But it's 700 mils, it's 3/4 of a litre in this. Plus, it's really great for keeping it hot. And there's a lovely little picture inside there. I don't know if I can show you. See? Herself is inside as well. Which way am I going? There she is. Yeah, just inside. So anyway, it's just a lovely mug. It's lovely to feel. It's lovely. It was expensive. I've never spent, no, it's not breaking the bank, but I've never spent more than a couple of euros on a mug.
And what tea are you drinking today?
Now, in Ireland, there'd be war over this. There's two rival Irish tea companies, let's say, that have Irish tea and package Irish tea and blend tea and all that. Lyons and Barry's. Now, Barry's tends to be the southern part of the country. It's based in Cork, and Lyons, the Dubs, tend to love it more. But all around the country, people have mixtures. I think even within households, there's nearly civil war over the tea bags. Now, I actually have a hidden stash of this. I don't know. Barry's tea, right, which is my favorite. Now, I have this in loose tea, and I have it here in tea bags, right? So this is my favorite. And I tend to go for the ones that say our strongest blend. The ones, the darker, the better, the stronger, the better. That's probably my favorite tea. But, and I've tried all the teas with different scents and flavors and licorice flavor and all. I wouldn't be keen on them. And herbal tea, I go through little patches every now and again. So the problem with me is, yes, by 8:30 in the morning, I used to be on my 3rd mug, right? This is the thing. So then by midday, I'd be on my 5th mug. This sort of, now I have reduced that down to 3, let's say, by midday. But now my massive sacrifice at the moment is that by 3 p.m., that's it. My final cup has to be drank by 3, sometimes 2 p.m. because, you know, I'm not the best sleeper in the world, and I was there drinking 15 mugs of strong tea every day. So that's Barry's, and there'll be war over that. So I'm just going to show you a few mugs.
Yes, please.
This is another recent purchase.
Oh, that's so pretty.
Quite wide. It's a bit like a soup kind of thing. Now, the only problem about this is my husband was putting it out for my morning cup, my first mug of the day. Thing is, there's actually a science behind this. When you have a narrower rim, especially if it comes in like that, it keeps the tea warmer longer. Mm-hmm. So I was there at breakfast, running around getting the kids things, everything. My tea was poured. Lo and behold, I go to drink it, and it's not great. Now, the thing is, occasionally, if my tea goes cold, and I don't do this very often, but I will stick it in the microwave, give it a zap. You can't do this. There's gold plate along the outside, or there'll be sparks flying inside the microwave. So that, unfortunately, is a mug that's been relegated to kind of midday cups of tea. This sister, like as in a nun, a friend of mine who was a nun, gave me, she was moving from A to B, and she had some cups and things that she wanted to give me as a kind of a gift, a going away gift or whatever. So this is Ascot, Duchess, Bone China, England. And I have to say, writing the Longbourn letters and probably a lot of the Watsons, I drink out of this just purely, again, it's atmospheric. We have lots of ordinary mugs here, but sometimes you just have to like match the book with the mug. And that was what a lot of it was written. Sometimes I go all out. Today I was at a soccer morning, and I was with my enamel mug.
Yes.
And I love enamel mugs because they make me feel like, even I was actually drinking outdoors, but it actually made me feel, I love the summer camping kind of feel. So it gives me that energy as well. Now, this I never drink out of, but I sometimes use it to kind of pretend I'm a lady. Now, this is, a Bavarian I have a Bavarian tea set. So I have the set that goes with that. Again, gold little rimmings and stuff like that. And this one is nice. My husband's grandfather, so my children's great-grandfather, gave this as a little gift. It says made in Czechoslovakia underneath, gold, again plated or whatever, and it's a pretty little thing. And he gave it to his girlfriend, who became his wife. And when I was getting married to my husband, he gave the grandfather, who passed away shortly after, gave that to me. And I thought that was lovely, because now I can pass it on to my daughter, and she has something from her great-grandfather that her great-grandfather gave to her great-grandmother. But I had stopped caring about mugs for quite a while, in that kind of getting lost in your children episode of my life. But more recently, it's come back again. And I think even the pandemic has accelerated it, because I kind of wanted to be surrounded by things that I, just to give me a little bit more pleasure. Like, there's enough crap out there. So like drinking a nice mug of tea out of, a nice mug, and not necessarily getting the tea bags that are 20 cents cheaper, but getting the ones I enjoy.
Right.
So tell me about tea for you, Melissa. Are you the iced tea type, or?
Not necessarily. My grandmother was from down south, my mother's mother. So she was always drinking iced tea all summer long when we would go and visit. So I do enjoy iced tea, but I'm a coffee in the morning. Like, coffee has to be the first cup of the day, and then tea is an evening drink.
Oh, very good. Very good.
How I was, or if you were sick, you got toast and tea when you were sick.
Yes.
But we have Red Rose was the brand that my grandmother had, and they had the little figures, and she collected all these little ceramic animal figures, miniatures that came in each box. So I remember looking, through all the little ones and playing them with when she was a kid. But I'm pretty sure it's a Canadian brand, and I grew up 10 minutes from the Canadian border. So we had a lot of things come back and forth, and family on both sides. So that was pretty common. But black tea, standard, like that is my favorite. And you have a little bit of cream, sometimes a touch of honey for a little sweetness.
Yeah. And have you been to the UK yet for a visit, or is that on your bucket list to come and visit Chawton House and Winchester? You will be drinking plenty of tea when you come there, and you'll be drinking it with milk.
Yes, maybe. I have not made it yet. Paulette, if you've seen her on Twitter.
Absolutely. Yeah.
She is going to be my tour guide. We have been talking and planning, and we were even like, we could circle over here and see Rose, and then we could come back. And,
brilliant.
Keep it fun during the pandemic and make some plans for the future.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I've been trying to do every virtual tour I can, and just kind of take it all in and enjoy it all before.
Yeah. Just on the tea front, actually, the beginning or the end is at Boston Land, which is one of those fun kind of modern day versions. Yeah, Austin Land is good, great fun. But I know she's there, and I'm watching her. She's making the tea. She doesn't talk about it, but she throws about 4 or 5. She throws loads of tea bags in, and I'm there going, "Go, girl! Yeah, you do it. You're drinking it the right way."
Yeah. So. No, I just one tea bag too. I probably do not drink very strong tea compared to what you drink, but yeah, I definitely. My son, he's like interested in tea because he sees me always drinking. He's like, just want to try one sip, and then he tries and he's like, that's not me, Mom. I don't like it, and I don't think it's as common. Like, most people in the U.S., at least that I know of, tea is not a very coffee is what everyone drinks.
Coffee is the main thing. And coffee, there is nothing like the smell of coffee in the morning. I still dream in my vision board sense of how my life is going to turn out. There's the smell of coffee in the morning, even though I'll be making it for someone else probably, but I see myself making it, and the smell I do think it's just something about it. It's a lovely smell in the morning.
My parents always had, my mom would drink pot after pot of coffee at home, and I just remember smelling it and begging to start drinking coffee, when I was 12, 13, and my mom would always say, you're a little too young. And then I think by the time I was 16, I was just telling my husband the other morning, I don't think I've really ever missed a day without a cup of coffee since I was 16. But it's just that little sip to wake you up, which I'm sure that it's the comfort of it.
Yeah. So, again, it's like that. Let's reach out for those little things, that just make us feel happy, like Austin does, make us feel familiar, make us feel safe. It's all these little things. They're not, taking any skin off anyone else's nose, but it's a time for that. And I think a bit of forgiveness. And just to let you know, not even an hour ago, I was inside in the bed. Now it's the afternoon here on a Saturday, and I've given myself permission to go for a snooze every now and again when I feel I need it. I have young kids and everything, yes, but I can organize my day so that everything is okay and they won't miss me for a few minutes. They know where I am if they need me, and maybe their dad is here anyway. But just, give ourselves permission to, remove a little bit of the struggle. So, surround ourselves with nice things. And
Isn't that a hard thing to do as a mom, as a parent, to give yourself permission to
Oh, absolutely. I'd say it's 12 months since I bought anything. And my 7-year-old said to me the other day, Mom, I think you need to buy yourself some clothes or shoes or something. I bought actually a pair of runners just because I walk a lot and I wear them to work and I wear them outside. And a tracksuit bottoms, I was going around in total rags. But yeah, you put everyone else kind of, it's the way of the mom, I think, a lot of the time. And I think we prevent ourselves from giving ourselves permission, because I certainly know my husband has no issues. If I told him I wanted to go away for a week on my own or anything, if I want to do anything, he'd say, go on, off you go. But I just kind of feel like, but I have this and I have that, and I'll make the excuses.
I'm the same way. I totally understand that. And that's kind of what led me into talking about,
the books actually in Austin.
Things that feel comfort for us. Yeah. And I didn't even know that Jane Austen fan fiction existed. I read a ton as a child, and then you go to college and you start reading textbooks and you just kind of forget about it. And I remember when I was pregnant with my son, the Twilight series was kind of in the midst of its craze. So I read that through pregnancy and would kind of dabble bits and pieces with books here and there. And then I ended up doing a life coaching sort of program, and they were talking about what brings you joy. And I was like, I miss reading. I used to read all the time, and I don't know why I ever stopped doing that. So about a year ago, I started, picking up some books again and finding what brings me joy, and went back to Austen immediately because I remembered, Austen was one of my favorites before, and then just stumbled into this world of, well, Mr. Darcy can keep going on and on because there's so many versions of Mr. Darcy to read out there. Yeah. And then, I came across your books from seeing you on Twitter and read the Longbourn letters. But I feel like there's almost this explosion again with the pandemic in Jane Austen fan fiction of people craving that familiar characters, but the comfort of being able to see the story reinvented over and over. Is that kind of what led you to decide to spin off of the Watson?
Yeah, I don't read quite a lot of Jane Austen fan fiction. I also don't, or I didn't up to recently, read a whole pile at all, up until, again, about 2 or 3 years ago, just having lost myself somewhere in a black hole, and realizing, yes, that was something when I was a child that I loved, was reading and, seeking out time to read and that. So I have joined book club, and, it's making me read books slightly outside my comfort zone as well, which is no harm at all. And so for me, I suppose, I'm a bit of a diehard loyalist when it comes to Jane Austen. So, and yet there would be that curiosity about her minor characters in particular. I love them. I love every single minor. Can you imagine Miss Bates getting her own book, or Lady Catherine in her youth? And, and I'm sure they have done. And, Mr. Palmer, how he met his wife, just all these fantastic minor characters that she developed, that each and every one could have series after series written about them. So her characters are so strong and that, but like you say, I think there is maybe something in us that it brings us comfort because we feel we know them very well as well, and we like to know what happened to them. And even though I don't read a huge pile of fan fiction, I do read some. And I know Mark Brownlow, my buddy, in Vienna has just released his Port and Proposals after Cake and Courtship, and Mr. Bennett, and the Bennets feature heavily in those. And I love his style as well. It keeps very much to the essence of Austen, and yet it's absolutely brand new as well, you know. So I laugh out loud, you know. He's it's something that actually I know there is a lot of people who would, I suppose, claim romance in that, but like I do think humor coming from Austen is important too, you know, and Mark hasn't named anyway, so I think, you know, that's the way I feel. But
I just finished Cake and Courtship.
Yeah, I saw that you gave it a great
review. I absolutely loved it, and when you talk about character-driven stories, Mary Bello is one of my favorite authors. I just think she does characters like nobody else. They could like not leave a room and I would find her characters exciting. But that is what I love. My favorite type of books to read when, you know, reading Mark's book, Mr. Bennett, I'm actually normally team Mrs. Bennett because I feel like she was trying to do the best for her daughters, and I think she's so silly and crazy. But you know, she was doing that like survival of the fittest, trying to marry her daughters off.
Yeah,
and I love the way when you kind of take the characters, rewind a bit, and see that why behind they're making the actions that we see them make. And I love almost like second guessing my opinion of people like, okay, I can see why he made those choices or why he was feeling the way that he was feeling because of that. And kind of flipping it on end. Mark did a great job, and I'm super excited to read his next one.
Yeah, same here. Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, and even, you know, you did that in the Watsons a little bit. I know there wasn't a ton of chapters for you to spin off of, but there was still the groundwork a little bit of the characters that Austen had created. Did you feel at liberty to make whatever changes you wanted to them, or were you trying to stay true to the essence that she had?
Oh, I was totally trying to stay true. I would never have, you know, taken it on with the sense that I was going to make it. Like, I really would like to think, even though I totally made up parts of it, that I didn't. I would like to think, because I really immersed myself so much in what she had left. I had been so immersed in Jane Austen's biographies and letters, just to see her workings, her ways, her approaching characters, and having researched that kind of extensively, but just even having stuck with the Watsons. And, you know, just now Virginia Woolf did say, and I totally agree with her here, that it was quite, well, she didn't use these words exactly, but to paraphrase her, it was fairly 2D. Now, the characters needed working, and the snippet she had left needed going over, and that's what Virginia Woolf had highlighted. She said she was obviously someone who would need to go back over and over and over again. Because she was a perfectionist, she would rewrite and rewrite and rewrite. So had she continued with the Watsons, I know she would have, you know, tidied it up a little bit more, because there was a lot of info dumping in those especially the first chapter. We were introduced to nearly too many characters, and I did have to tweak it a little bit to draw out a little bit. So if you've read the Watsons before, you'll probably still have to go back and read mine from the beginning, because there was one character who was later on that comes in a little bit earlier, and there was a little bit of dividing up that first chapter into first and second, purely just because there was huge information overload. There was one or two characters that doubled up. There was, you know, it was a little bit too much, and I just needed to kind of, what would you say? Like flesh it out a little bit, and make them a little bit more 3D. But the essence of the whole lot was actually in that time. You know, there was only up to 7 chapters, let's say 6, let's say chapters, 17,000 words or more, and it was all there actually. The basic character personality traits, everything that she had said, you know, about it and everything, and I just felt I really want to stick with it. So, like, the Tomlinson's carriage passes. In the first chapter, let's say it's passing, it's on the way to the ball. It's not in the first chapter, it's in the next one, but it's on the way to the ball. And we know the Tomlinsons are a wealthy family living on the outskirts of the town. So, of course, when I was drawing out characters, the Tomlinsons were going to be it. Then she mentions as well the Shaws, and the Shaws are encouraging Penelope with their uncle in Chichester. So the Shaws came back with their uncle and Penelope, and that whole storyline about Mr. Shaw and Elizabeth, and that developed from there. So I really didn't invent any new characters, bar what Jane Austen had given us, except Mrs. Ellingham. She came out because there was Mr. Watson required, being pulled out as well and being made more 3D, and he had a story. And also, it was very young people heavy. And I suppose as I'm hitting middle age, I'm conscious that those characters need a little bit more representation too. People who are at different stages in their life. And it was a very young group of people, bar maybe Lady Osborne and Mr. Watson. So I just wanted to even it up a little bit, because all her characters usually, I mean, if we look at Emma and that, we have Mr. Woodhouse and we have Miss Bates and her mother, and we have, what's the name of the chap who marries Miss Taylor? Frank Churchill's dad, anyway. Basically, we have characters like that. And I just think it was a bit fairer to kind of put in Mrs. Ellingham. She had a really important role in the book too. So that was it, really. I did feel I kept as loyal as absolutely possible to it. And I really pulled things out when I felt they didn't feel authentic, So yeah. It was kind of my mission. Like, it was my aim. I was never going to sway from that. I wanted to write the book that it felt like it had been discovered under the floorboards at Chawton Cottage. That's it. I wanted it to feel like, oh my God, they're after finding it now in the attic in Chawton Cottage. And it was there all the time and she'd finished it. I really wanted it to feel like Austen had got her chance to finish it. So that was my aim. And it wasn't really that was it. And I know it sounds a bit pompous or, mad, because it was mad to do it. Was, to stick my name alongside her on the front of the cover. I had huge issues with that. And I felt, who do I think I am? And what even happened, and I was pushed into this by Amazon, is I had to put my name before hers. Do you know, I had, because, it's just mad. So, yeah.
I did a brilliant job. I think you kept, because I know there is two very different camps. There's, the people that want only to stay true to Austen and appreciate that, and there's nothing wrong with that. And then there's others that like those characters and go off on something that's a modern retelling or steamy or whatever. There's room for those too. There's room for everything.
There's room for everyone. There's absolutely room. And I have to say, I would have been the first camp originally, Melissa, but I love I love Bride and Prejudice, Bollywood. There's been some amazing spin-offs and adaptations and books that have been done. And I just want to say, I would be originally from the loyal camp, but I have become more open-minded. And one of the reasons, and I'm going to show you now, is just show you that. Okay, I'm going to go back and read that. But it's called The Art of Screen Adaptation. And in this is Andrew Davies, let me see, Myra Buffini, who does Jane Eyre, Great Expectations, Sarah Phelps. There's one here, Deborah Magog, who does Pride and Prejudice 2005, the one with Keira Knightley and that. So this is just amazing. It's interviews with all of them, and it gives the perspective of what they can do with the original work and what they can't. And I've totally given everyone slack now. Now I understand the nature of what you do with someone else's work. It's kind of has really made me move out of my, I was quite, I suppose, conservative nearly, Now I see that, exactly, that there's a huge amount of room. And streamingmusicals.com, for anyone who's interested in musicals, amazing musical there, Pride and Prejudice. It was on Broadway or off Broadway. And the other one is Emma, and that's on Streaming Musicals. I've got such pleasure from that. And that is total lockdown heaven. Because it's just amazing. And they can't fit 14 hours on stage. They have to do something in, let's say, an hour and 45 minutes or whatever, 2 hours. And just amazing how much they can capture. And it's just incredible. Yeah.
I haven't made it to the musicals yet, but I am working my way there. I'm going to watch them eventually.
Yeah.
And so many of us also love the movie adaptations. And like you said, you have to allow freedom for the director, because even when we read a book, that's why there's different book reviewers. You pick the person that their view kind of aligns with you the most, and we all read the same book and come out with a completely different experience at the end. And the director's job is to show their experience of that work.
Absolutely.
The new Emma, the first time I watched it, I was ready to walk out of the theater. I was like, I can't handle this one. Like, there's the big scene at the proposal. I was like, this should not be happening. And I watched it 3 or 4 times now, and every time I watch it, I fall a little bit more in love with it. And now I just think it's amazing.
I love it. I absolutely love it. I'm totally in love with it. It's for me, it's incredible. And I'm often surprised. The Mansfield Park with Billie Piper in it, I love that, and it gets a lot of slack, and I'm often surprised, but there's so much room for discussion on the Jane Austen forums and stuff like that. And there's room for everyone to have their own opinions too. So and I think that's really important.
We shouldn't be fighting. I feel like any Austen is good Austen, and if it I saw there was a new announcement that the CW is going to be doing some modern remakes of the shows now, and there was a lot of fuss about that. But if it brings a new audience into Austen, then I'm all for it. It might not be for me, but it's for someone else out there. So.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I love it.
Any other questions now?
Yes, I will just ask you, what are you currently reading, and what should we be expecting from you in the future?
Okay, what a question. Well, first of all, I probably I'm finishing a book from my book club called The Winter Garden by Kristen Hanna. So I'm just reading that now. I've just finished a book as well by Roisin Meany called It's That Time of the Year. It's a real Christmas book, and it's just beautiful. Oh my God, it's just such a lovely book. So that's Roisin Meany. She's a best-selling Irish author. She's amazing. But I suppose if I'm being honest, as I've kind of finished them, I am veering back towards these because it's kind of research. All right, so I have that one read, and I have another one on screen adaptations, and I'm going back to this because I've read that and I really enjoyed it. And I've done a course in the past. I'm doing one maybe in the new year as well. And I just kind of want to brush up on that a bit. And my background, I was writing something and I had to shelve it. So what I'm doing is, again, like that nap in the middle of the day approach, I'm not killing myself over it. It's okay. I'm looking at this. I'm reading all the books that interest me. I'm just trying to think now, what else have I downstairs at the moment? But that's probably where I'm going. I'm going to stick with nonfiction for a little while, read more, and probably watch the Emma musical and watch these. I'm not 100% sure where I'm going, in the sense that I am doing some writing. Being honest with you, look, I had an outline for Sanditon done long ago. If the energy comes back, I'll finish that. That's a personal project. It may never see the light of day, but it's just that I had my own version of what was going to unfold with Sanditon, and I might do that, and I mightn't do it in like novel form. I might do it like as a play or something. I just something to put it down, just to see how, let the characters speak as I see them. And as I say, I had a little plot structure, a thing that happened. I hadn't 100% ironed out, but I might go back to that as well. But what I'm doing at the moment is I have a course coming up in the new year, and it's one I got a little bit of Arts Council funding for, and I'd like to just do that and just allow things to come as they come, and explore things and write things down. But I've learned a lot about myself as a writer. I've learned that I have to gallop for the first draft. And what happened probably with the project I was doing was I was dragging it out too much. I hadn't time. And what I've done actually is I'm going part-time after Christmas as well at work. I'm just going to allow myself a bit more time, obviously to spend time with my family as well. I can do parental things, but also a bit more creative time as well, So, yeah. So hopefully I'll explore that.
It probably helps to give yourself a little bit of grace as a writer to let the story flow rather than forcing it to come out. Yeah.
And I think as well that it's a bit like whoever that chap was back in industrial England who came up with the crop rotation idea. You produce, you let follow. you produce. And the thing is, you can often get the imposter syndrome and beat yourself up. But as I say, I'm in a place right now, it could disappear again tomorrow, where I'm actually saying, no, this is creative. Like, all time is creative. So if I'm watching Emma the musical, that is creative. And that's, you know, if I'm rewatching one of the adaptations, if I'm reading books, if I'm going back to the original Austen, or totally different books. And it's funny, I have an interview with Chawton House coming up on the birthday, which you know, and I'm obviously hoping, no, not Chawton House, yeah, Chawton House and the Jane Austen Museum have an afternoon tea, or a tea event after it. So I'm going to be going to like one, and then hopefully attending the other one online as well as a guest, like just as a, you know, an attendee. But the thing is, as I was saying to them, I can't even remember my train of thought. What was I talking about?
We're talking about creativity and allowing yourself the freedom.
Yeah, I was telling lovely Dr. Kim Simpson there that, like, if I read, I'm very easily influenced. You see, I have to mind myself, because if I read Harry Potter in the middle of writing the Watsons, Solomon Tomlinson would come in a broomstick instead of a carrot. That is literally the way I operate. If I read something, it just ends up there. Like, you know, they'll end up exactly at Hogwarts or something. So I really do. I'm allowing this time to be a time of fallow from the writing perspective. I can maybe do a bit of writing, but I'm actually doing a little bit of nurturing, gathering, reaching out to people, you know, reading more for myself. Because as I say, if I do start writing, I have to gallop. And if I do write, I have to stay away from reading unless it's relevant. So I think when I was writing the Watsons, it might have only been the biographies and letters and things like that I was reading at the time. I'm quite careful not to let myself be too influenced, you know. So
right, I love that. So your main I think point to everyone that's watching is to just take time to nurture yourself, whether you're writing, reading. Give yourself
absolutely
right now.
None of it is wasted time. None of it is wasted time. And if I did read, and I do read things like, you know, writers, I'm intrigued with the writing process. So I often read books. I have a great book there, The Writer's Desk, and, you know, it shows them at their desk and talks about their process. And I've read several of these and articles and all that sort of thing. But you often find that even hundreds of years ago, like really famous writers would often go, they might only do 2 hours a day. Actually, Debbie Maggock, that's here, the lady that wrote Pride and Prejudice 2005. I watched an interview with her recently. I think it's called This Writer's Life or The Writer's Life. It's on Facebook. And she was saying, oh my God, like, I do 2 hours a day max, and kind of go out and walk the dog. And like, there's no, and you could feel she was very confident. She was like, I wouldn't write any better if I was writing more. Right. And she said, I have a cigarette and a glass of wine after that. I was like, this is my kind of woman, like, you know, you know, rock on. So yeah, I love that.
I'm kind of all in this, like, we have to produce as much as possible and be creative.
There's an awful lot of pressure with this, you know. I write so many thousand words a day, and I do believe that works for some people. And plus, I'm lazy, so maybe that would actually, a touch of that would work. But I think when you, I certainly, for me, feeling anxious about it doesn't help me. It only keeps me more in writer's block and stuff like that. So for me at the moment, I am in nurturing and in getting info in mode, and hopefully I'll regurgitate out probably in the new year when I'm doing this course that I'm doing, that will, you know, make me write something for every week. I have to produce something. So, you know, it's kind of like, you know, it's okay. It's coming up to Christmas. I'm nurturing myself. There's no wasted time if we're looking after ourselves, because I'm the world's worst at looking after myself. But I know for a fact that things tend to flow more when you're a bit more relaxed, and when you're pushing, I must and I should. So when I hear the musts and shoulds, I know I'll end up running around in circles, banging my head against a wall. But even what I shelved was a remarkable journey. That piece, I might come back to it, you know. I just have put it aside for now, because actually it was like I worked through the emotions of it. Right. And it was like, oh my God, I had myself cured halfway through writing it. So I was like, oh no, I don't have the anger now anymore to keep this going. You know, I had lost the anger. I could go and start fighting with my husband if it would help, but it wasn't what it was about, you know. But the funny thing was, I probably should have written the first draft really fast. But look, I've learned something. And as I say, I might come back to it. And, you know, it was historical fiction. It wasn't Austen, but it was interesting. And something might come out of it. Who knows, a short story, something small might come out of it. It certainly was a big part of my life. But even reading it, researching it was a pure joy. Like, it was a joy discovering books and buying them and finding out more and more interesting things, and it was wonderful. So maybe that'll all come in as a character or as a theme in my next book. So nothing is wasted, you know.
No. I'm so looking forward to whatever comes out of your creativity in the
So
future.
am I.
Amazing. And
But-
even if you don't have any other books coming out quickly, people can always grab the Watsons, the Longbourn letters. And then I know you're frequently speaking at different events. Like you mentioned, I will leave links down below for the Chawton House. I think that's December 16th.
December 16th. Yeah.
Yes, and then I don't know if there's tickets left. I know I grabbed mine early on because I wanted to make sure for the Austin Museum.
I hope so. I know they were selling very well, all right, but I do hope, like, especially online events, they, you know, there should be, you know, well able to accommodate quite a large number, hopefully, anyway. So
yeah. And I will also leave all of Rose's social media down below, so everyone can connect with you. And I'll leave links to your books too, so they can.
Thank you so much. And it's a creative time. It's it's kind of a time of transition. As I say, my background is in theatre as well, and because I'm freeing up time for me, it feels like the best gift I could give myself. That time is actually something I had time poverty. So, like, I'm feeling a little bit more like I'm after giving myself permission again, and I feel like I'm dipping my toes back into theatre and back into things, and that the pandemic has shown me that there's so much online that I never knew that was there, and I can sit on my sofa and enjoy. So just saying, you know, who knows? I'm leaving all doors open. I'm exploring, and there will be something out next year. I'm very confident of that. But it's a time of input at the moment, and then projectiling, vomiting it out into the world. So
we're in such an amazing time where, you know, on the one hand, we're living through so much craziness, but it's also opened so many doors of opportunities to be able to see, like, you know, I was able to watch you speak at an event in Ireland and to see Melissa speak and to join in online to so many things that we wouldn't have had the opportunity because they weren't being streamed. So people need to, like you said, just soak in all this time of creativity and then let whatever is going to flow out of it.
Someone said recently that, like, it's almost like, look, I know how it is, and I know it's devastating. And my husband lost his job, and, like, look, there's an awful lot devastating about this time. There's another part of me thinking that things have had to accelerate because of it, like certainly around technology and that. We've had to do, you know, things have had to really move fast, and people have had to reach out, and my parents have had to learn, my mother, WhatsApp and things like that, you know. So at the same time, there's a sense, I feel, that, you know, that there'll be a lot of grabbing hold of opportunities next year. People changing careers, people looking to see you have their work-life balance. I think there is a lot of reflection, and, you know, I hope everyone will be happy and realize what's important in their lives, and please God, it will happen for them. And, you know, that's my wish for everyone. And look, if you're feeling crap, the Longbourn letters, it is a laugh. Go for the light stuff. Oh, I'm not able to read any of the heavy stuff at the moment. Go for the light stuff. And most libraries, it's available to order through your library, so you can get it free. So don't, you know, I'm sure it's even free on Kindle sometimes, you know, and I'll probably, you know, let it off free again. I usually do it for, let's say, Jane Austen's birthday, or, you know, in the summer, something like that, you know, when she passed away, I usually, you know, put it down for free as well. Like, so just say, you know, keep it light, keep it whatever. Melissa, you're a joy.
Thank you
so much for giving so much of your time.
What's that?
I just said thank you so much. You give so much of your time to promoting writers and readers, and you know, bring so much happiness into other people's lives. And I love your fashion, and I'm watching you on Instagram as well. And I know you're being true to yourself as well in following all that. So thank you so much. It's been such a lovely interview.
Thank you. I just love that Austen continues to just bring us all together, those classics, and we all share so many similar experiences through reading, and it brings so much joy.
Absolutely. And people can contact me, particularly on Twitter, if they have any questions after this interview. I'm happy to answer them. Okay? And
perfect. Thank you, Rose, so much.
Thank you, Melissa.
Talk to you later. Bye-bye.